The air in the dining room was thick with the scent of lemon polish and roasted chicken, a cloying sweetness that clung to the back of my throat. Each click of silverware against the expensive china was a tiny, sharp punctuation in the suffocating silence. Diane had arranged the dinner like a military operation, a strategic display of familial harmony for the benefit of the Andersons, our neighbors, who were smiling with polite confusion. "We're just so thrilled about Liam's future at Northwood University," Diane announced, her voice a polished bell ringing through the room. She smiled, a perfect, practiced curve of lips that never quite reached her eyes. "It's such a respected liberal arts college. The networking opportunities alone are unparalleled." I focused on dissecting a piece of asparagus, aligning the tines of my fork with surgical precision. Northwood was a phantom, a ghost college I had never once considered, let alone applied to. It existed only in Diane's meticulously curated vision of our family, a glossy brochure life where sons didn't disappear into the anonymous, olive-drab world of the military. "What will you be studying, Liam?" Mr. Anderson asked, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. Before I could formulate a noncommittal grunt, Diane swept in. "He's keeping his options open, Bill. That's the beauty of a liberal arts education. A well-rounded mind is the ultimate currency." She took a delicate sip of Chardonnay. "It's about building a certain stature, something you just can't get at those large, impersonal state schools." My father, Robert, sat at the head of the table, a silent monument to conflict avoidance. He offered a weak smile, his gaze fixed on his plate as if the pattern of the china held the answers to his quiet unease. I could see the tension in the way he held his shoulders, hunched slightly, as if trying to make himself a smaller target. He loved me, I knew that in some abstract way, but his love was a quiet, passive thing, easily overshadowed by Diane's formidable will. The conversation swirled around me, a current I refused to swim in. I let their words become a dull hum, focusing instead on the feel of the cool, smooth stem of my water glass, the weight of the lie settling in my stomach like a stone. This was the opening gambit, the public announcement meant to box me in. By boasting to the Andersons, Diane was making my fictional enrollment a social fact, something that would be infinitely more embarrassing for her to retract later. Later, after the Andersons had left with firm handshakes and congratulations, the polished facade crumbled. The silence in the wake of the closing door was heavier than before, charged with the unspoken. Diane started clearing the plates, her movements sharp and efficient. "Well, that went nicely," she said, her back to me. "I'll call the admissions office at Northwood tomorrow to finalize the housing deposit. Their priority housing deadline is next week." I remained seated, my hands flat on the cool wood of the table. "I'm not going to Northwood, Diane." She froze, a plate hovering over the stack. Slowly, she turned. The pleasant hostess was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating woman beneath. "Excuse me." I said, "I'm not going to Northwood. I never applied." The plate clattered into the sink. "Then what precisely is your plan, Liam? To work at the grocery store? To live in our basement while you find yourself?" She infused the phrase with such withering contempt it felt like a physical blow. "We've had this discussion. A degree from a place like Northwood opens doors. An engineering degree from some technical school." She waved a hand, dismissing the entire scientific and mechanical foundation of the modern world. "It's so utilitarian. It lacks prestige." "It's what I want to do," I said, my voice low but steady. It was the same argument we'd been having for a year, a circular track leading nowhere. "I want to build things, solve actual problems." "The problems you should be solving are how to build a respectable life," she shot back, crossing her arms. "Image matters, Liam. Perception is reality. What will I tell my friends when they ask about you? That you're some kind of mechanic." My father appeared in the doorway, a ghost haunting the periphery of the conflict. "Now, Diane, maybe we should just..." "Stay out of this, Robert," she said without even looking at him. Her focus was entirely on me, a laser of disapproval. "This isn't a negotiation. You need a proper education. We are not having a dropout in this family." The word hung in the air, ugly and final. To her, any path other than the one she had prescribed was tantamount to failure. I didn't bother arguing further. There was no point. Words were her weapon, and in a battle of rhetoric, I would always lose. My strength was in action, in planning, in the quiet execution of a decided course. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. I have plans, I said, and walked out of the room, leaving the tension crackling behind me. I felt my father's weary gaze on my back, a silent plea for peace at any cost. 2 days later, I stood at rigid attention in a Spartan office at the local military entrance processing station. The air smelled of floor wax and old coffee. Captain Eva Rostova sat behind a government-issue metal desk, her posture so perfect it made my own stance feel sloppy. She was in her early 30s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing and dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that defied gravity. She scanned the final sheet of paper in a thick folder that bore my name. "Everything is in order, Carter," she said, her voice clipped and clear, devoid of unnecessary warmth but radiating a solid, reliable authority. "Your medical, your physical fitness test, your congressional nomination. It's official. You're sworn in. Report to West Point for reception day on July 1st. A tremor, part terror, part exhilarating relief, ran through me. This was it. The secret I had been nurturing for over a year, through endless study sessions for the SATs, grueling workouts alone in the dark morning hours, and the complex application process that felt like a clandestine mission, was now a concrete reality. Captain Rostova looked up from the file, her gaze piercing. "You understand what you're getting into? It's not all parade grounds and tradition. It's mental, it's physical, and it will test you in ways you can't yet imagine. They will break you down purposefully to see what you're made of. The question is, what will they find when they do?" "Resilience, ma'am," I said, the word feeling true and solid on my tongue. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "That's the idea. They don't care about your stepmother's social aspirations. They care about discipline, integrity, and the will to lead. You have the raw material, but raw material has to be forged." She closed the folder with a definitive thud. "This is your path now, own it." I left the processing station feeling 10 feet tall, the weight of the future a welcome burden on my shoulders. The pristine, oppressive atmosphere of my house felt like a different planet. I needed a dose of reality, a sanctuary. I found it in Maya's garage, which had been our clubhouse since we were kids trying to build a go-kart out of scrap wood and stubbornness. The air was thick with the honest smells of motor oil and sawdust. Maya was under the hood of her ancient Honda Civic, her hands black with grime, her curly hair escaping from a messy ponytail. "Well," she asked, her voice muffled by the engine block, "did you get the official Your Property of the U.S. government stamp?" "July 1st, I said, leaning against the workbench piled with tools whose purposes I knew intimately thanks to years spent here. She slid out from under the car, her face smudged but her grin brilliant. "Yes, I knew it." She wiped her hands on an already filthy rag. "So, when are you telling the wicked stepmother? I want to buy tickets." The humor drained from my face. "Soon." She was laying it on thick at dinner with the Andersons the other night, talking about Northwood like I'd already bought the sweatshirt. Maya's smile faded, replaced by a fierce, protective scowl. "Liam, you have to tell them. You can't just disappear on July 1st. The fallout will be worse." "How?" I asked, the frustration bubbling up. "You know how she is. It'll be a 3-hour lecture on how I'm embarrassing the family, throwing my life away. She'll cry, she'll manipulate Dad. It's easier to just go." "Easier for who?" she challenged, poking me in the chest with a greasy finger. "For you, maybe, but it's cowardly. And you're not a coward, you're about to become an officer. So start acting like one. Face the fire now before it becomes a damn wildfire." She was right. I knew she was right. Maya had always been my compass, pointing true north when my own sense of direction got clouded by silence and strategy. Her loyalty wasn't just about support, it was about pushing me to be better, even when it was hard. The next week was a slow-motion torture. Diane's cheerful chatter about dorm room essentials and college orientation felt like needles pricking my skin. Every mention of Northwood was a reminder of the impending explosion. I practiced the words in my head. "I've been accepted to the United States Military Academy. I report in July." They sounded simple, but in the atmosphere of our home, they felt like a declaration of war. The catalyst came on a Tuesday morning. Diane, in a flurry of organizational zeal, decided to tidy my room, a transparent excuse to snoop. I was in the backyard, methodically sharpening the blade on the lawnmower, finding solace in the rhythmic scrape of metal on stone. The screech of the back door flying open shattered the calm. Diane stood on the patio, her face a mask of cold, trembling fury. In her hand, she clutched a piece of crisp, expensive stationery. I recognized it immediately. It was the letter from Northwood University, the one I had received weeks ago and promptly used to formally decline their offer of admission. "What is this?" she hissed, her voice dangerously low. She marched toward me, thrusting the paper in my face. "I found this in your desk. This is the rejection from Northwood. They rejected you." I stood up, wiping my hands on my jeans. "No, Diane, I rejected them." The confusion on her face was brief, quickly consumed by dawning, horrified understanding. You what? You declined your acceptance, without telling us, without any other plan?" Her voice rose with each question, scaling towards hysteria. "So it's true, you are just dropping out, you're throwing away your future for nothing." "I have a plan," I said, my own voice quiet but firm, a rock in the torrent of her anger. "A plan to do what? To become a bum?" She was shrieking now, the sound echoing in the quiet suburban yard. "After everything we've done for you, the opportunities we've given you, this is how you repay us, by sabotaging yourself, by making us a laughingstock." My father appeared at the door, his face pale. "Diane, please, the neighbors." "I don't care about the neighbors," she screamed, whirling on him. "Your son is throwing his life away. Are you just going to stand there?" Robert looked from her enraged face to my resolute one. I saw the struggle in his eyes, the desperate desire to placate, to smooth things over. But the situation was beyond smoothing. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He didn't say a word. He just retreated back into the dark doorway, leaving me alone on the battlefield. Diane turned back to me, her eyes blazing with a toxic mix of rage and triumph. She had her narrative now. I wasn't the determined kid with a secret plan. I was the ungrateful dropout, the family disappointment. "You will get a job," she spat, jabbing the letter toward me. "You will pay rent. You will not freeload in this house while you find yourself. Do you understand me? This fantasy is over." She turned and stormed back into the house, slamming the door so hard the window pane rattled. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of a lawnmower a few yards over. I stood there in the bright summer sun, the sharp, clean smell of freshly cut grass filling the air. The gulf between me and that house felt wider than any ocean. I was resolved, but I was utterly alone within those walls. The first shot had been fired, and the war for my own life had begun. The Hudson Valley air was a physical presence, thick and heavy with a humidity that clung to my skin even before the sun had fully risen. It smelled of damp earth, cut grass, and the faint, sharp tang of sweat from the 100 other new cadets already forming up around me. 3 months. It felt like a lifetime and the blink of an eye. The polished artifice of my stepmother's dining room, the weight of her lie hanging over the dinner table, it was a memory from another world. Here in the pre-dawn gray of Beast Barracks, there were no lies, only consequences. "Carter, is your head in your locker or on your shoulders? Move!" The voice of the upperclassman, a firstie whose name I'd learned was Davies, was a bark that bypassed the ears and went straight to the spine. It was designed to disorient, to strip away the civilian hesitancy that still clung to all of us. I focused on the simple, brutal geometry of the task. Lace the boots, double-tie the knots, align the cap brim precisely 2 fingers above the bridge of the nose. My father's quiet sigh at that dinner, the way his eyes had darted from Diane's triumphant smile to my stoic face, flashed in my mind. I pushed it down, locking it away in a mental compartment. Here, there was no room for that kind of reflection. Here, the only rebellion was perfection. The morning's training was a forced march under rucksacks that grew heavier with every uphill step. The straps dug into my shoulders, a constant, grinding pressure. My focus narrowed to the heels of the cadet in front of me, the rhythm of my own breathing, the methodical placement of one foot after another. This was the anonymous, olive-drab world Diane had so casually dismissed. It was anonymous, yes. There were no individual accolades here, only the collective performance of the platoon. But it was honest. The blisters on my feet were real. The ache in my muscles was earned. It was the antithesis of her carefully staged reality. During a 10-minute water break, sitting on the dusty ground, a collective groan went up as the TAC officer announced mail call. For most, it was a moment of cherished connection. For me, it was a weekly exercise in emotional fortitude. I received 2 letters, their contrast a perfect summary of my bifurcated existence. The first was from Maya. Her handwriting was a familiar, energetic scrawl that covered every inch of the page. I saved it for last, a reward for getting through the other. The second envelope was my father's. His handwriting was neat, precise, an accountant's script. I slid it open with my thumb. Liam, I hope this finds you well and that you're staying safe. Things here are quiet. Diane sends her regards. I could almost smell the conflict wafting off the page. He couldn't even bring himself to write a lie directly, hiding behind the passive, sends her regards. We ran into Mrs. Anderson at the club last week. She mentioned she hadn't seen you around and wondered how Northwood was treating you. I didn't quite know what to say. Diane handled it, of course. She explained that you decided to take some time to find your path. The words "find your path" were circled in my mind, dripping with Diane's condescension. She hadn't just told the Andersons, she'd crafted a narrative. I wasn't a soldier in training, I was a dropout, a confused boy figuring himself out. Son, I want you to know that whatever you're going through, your mother and I are here for you. It's not too late to reconsider your choices. A good education is so important. Northwood's Dean of Admissions is a friend of Diane's. She mentioned there might still be a place for you in the spring semester if you decide to come to your senses. The paper crumpled slightly in my grip. Come to your senses. The pity in that phrase was a deeper cut than any upperclassman's insult. He believed her. He truly believed I had impulsively thrown away a golden future for some reckless whim. The passive father who had sat in silence while my life was rerouted without my consent was now passively endorsing the lie, his concern a weapon wielded by my stepmother. The heat of the day, the exhaustion in my limbs, fused with a cold, sharp anger in my chest. I carefully smoothed the letter, folded it, and tucked it back into my pocket. Another piece of evidence to be filed away. Then I turned to Maya's letter. It was like opening a window. Liam, you will not believe the absolute audacity of that woman. I am writing this while still vibrating with pure, unadulterated rage, so excuse the handwriting. My mom dragged me to the neighborhood block party last night, torture, obviously, and who holds court by the punch bowl but the queen of false appearances herself. Maya's voice was so clear in my head it was as if she were whispering in my ear. She went on to describe the scene in vivid detail. Diane, perfectly coiffed and smiling, holding a glass of white wine, holding forth to a captive audience of neighbors. So old Mrs. Gable asks about you, says she heard a rumor you weren't at Northwood. And Diane gets this performatively sad look on her face, this little sigh that's meant to convey long-suffering maternal concern. She says, and I quote, "Our Liam is taking a little hiatus. He's always been such a sensitive soul, you know? The pressure of a rigorous academic environment was just too much for him right now. He's off on a bit of a walkabout, trying to find some direction." A walkabout, Liam? She made it sound like you're backpacking through Europe to find your spirit animal, not getting your ass kicked at West Point. She said it with this tone of such fake sympathy, like she's just the poor, patient mother of a wayward son. I saw your dad standing off to the side, just nodding along looking miserable. I almost threw my plastic cup of fruit punch right at her pristine white linen dress. I could feel the phantom sensation of Maya's protective fury, a lifeline stretching across the miles. She was my eyes and ears, the sole guardian of the truth back in that world of polished lies. Her letter was a battle report from the home front, and it confirmed my worst suspicions. Diane's fiction was now the accepted truth. I was no longer the quiet, disciplined son. I was the family's unstable secret. The whistle blew, signaling the end of the break. We shouldered our rucksacks again. The physical weight was nothing compared to the new burden I carried. But instead of crushing me, it solidified into a cold, hard core of resolve. Let them talk. Let them believe I was lost. Their disbelief would become my fuel. A week later, the theoretical met the practical in a concrete bay known as the sandbox. We were being introduced to basic field fortifications, and I was covered in a fine layer of grit, my hands raw from hauling sandbags. Captain Eva Rostova moved through the chaos of cadets with a quiet, unnerving efficiency. She was our assigned mentor, a West Point graduate and an Army engineer with a reputation for being sharp and unsparing. She didn't yell. Her disapproval was a quieter, more potent thing, delivered with a pointed observation that could dismantle your confidence more effectively than any screamed insult. She stopped beside me, her eyes scanning the revetment I was building. "Your base is uneven, Cadet Carter," she said, her voice calm and low. "The third sandbag on the left is destabilizing the entire second layer. It's a single point of failure." I followed her gaze and saw she was right. A rookie mistake born of rushing, of letting frustration override method. "I see it, ma'am. I'll correct it." I expected her to move on, but she remained, watching as I unstacked and restacked the bags with deliberate care. "You're angry," she stated, not as an accusation, but as a simple fact like noting the weather. I froze for a fraction of a second, then continued working. Denial was pointless. Captain Rostova had a way of seeing through the uniform. "It's a motivator, ma'am." "Is it?" She picked up a sandbag and handed it to me, her movements economical. "Anger is a spark. It can ignite a fire, or it can cause an explosion that destroys the engine. Right now, you're letting it make you sloppy. You're so focused on proving something to someone who isn't here that you're neglecting the task in front of you." Her words landed with the precision of a scalpel. She had seen right through the disciplined exterior to the churning resentment beneath, the product of my father's pity and Diane's slander. I finished aligning the sandbag, ensuring the seams were tight and level. "The goal isn't to feel the hardship, cadet," she continued, her gaze sweeping over the other struggling new cadets. "The goal is to become indifferent to it, to let it wash over you without affecting your focus. Endure with grace. Let your work, your precision, be your only statement. Everything else is noise." Endure with grace. The phrase stuck with me long after she had moved on. It was the opposite of everything I felt. I wanted to rage, to send a copy of my acceptance letter to every single one of my parents' friends. But that was Diane's game, public perception, grand gestures. Captain Rostova was offering a different path, quiet, relentless excellence. It was a language I understood. The culmination of those weeks was the obstacle course, a gauntlet of mud, water, ropes, and walls designed to test every ounce of physical and mental fortitude. The air was filled with the sounds of grunting, shouted encouragement, and the slosh of water. I was caked in mud, my uniform heavy and cold, my muscles screaming as I pulled myself hand over hand across a rope suspended over a murky pond. Halfway across, my arms began to burn with a ferocious intensity. My grip started to slip. In that moment of failure, my mind didn't conjure images of Diane's smug face or my father's disappointed eyes. Instead, I heard Captain Rostova's calm, clear voice. "Endure with grace. Let your work be your only statement." I adjusted my grip, finding a more efficient technique we'd been taught, and focused solely on the rhythm of the pull, the feel of the coarse rope in my palms, the next handhold. The anger was still there, a hot coal in my gut, but I didn't let it burn out of control. I let it heat the forge of my will. I reached the other side, rolled onto the bank, and immediately pushed forward to the next obstacle, a 20-foot wooden wall slick with mud. I didn't hesitate. I took a running start, planted my foot, and launched myself upward, my fingers finding purchase on the top ledge. I hauled myself over and dropped down the other side, landing in a crouch. I finished the course not first, but well ahead of the standard, my body trembling with exhaustion, but my mind clearer than it had been in months. That night, in the stark silence of the barracks after lights out, the day's exhaustion settled deep into my bones. The only light came from the red lens flashlight I was allowed to use. Lying on my bunk, I pulled out a sheet of stationery. We were restricted to brief phone calls, but letters were unlimited. I needed the permanence of ink on paper, the deliberate pace of writing, to talk to Maya. "Maya, it's past taps and everything aches. I can barely hold this pen, but I needed to write this down to tell you so it feels real. Today I conquered an obstacle course that felt like it was designed by sadists. I was covered in mud, my muscles felt like they were on fire, and for a moment, halfway across a rope, I thought I was going to fail. But I didn't. I pushed through. It's strange. The anger I feel about what's happening back home, about the story Diane is telling, it's still there. But I'm learning to use it differently. Not as an explosive, but as a steady fuel. Captain Rostova, my mentor, told me to endure with grace, to let my work be my statement. That's what I'm going to do. Let Diane tell her stories. Let my father believe them. Let the whole neighborhood think I'm a dropout on a walkabout. You are the only one who knows the truth, and that's enough for now. Keep being my eyes and ears. Keep sending those reports from the front lines of absurdity. Every word fuels me. I'm not lost. I'm not confused. I am here in this anonymous, olive-drab world, building something she could never understand. A foundation that can't be lied about at a dinner party. I will prove them all wrong, not with words, but with this. With every perfectly stacked sandbag, every obstacle overcome, every silent, disciplined step I take. I'm going to become so solid, so undeniable, that their lies will just shatter against the truth of what I've built. Watch me. I signed my name, folded the letter, and sealed it in an envelope. Outside, the Hudson Valley was dark and quiet. Somewhere to the south, in a perfectly decorated house, my stepmother was likely sleeping soundly, secure in the fiction she had created. My father was probably lying awake, wrestling with a version of his son that didn't exist. But here, in the dark, I felt a strange, hard-won peace. The echo chamber of their lies was miles away. The only sound that mattered was the quiet, steady beat of my own heart, a metronome counting down the time until my actions would finally speak for themselves. The cold bit through my Army service uniform, a dry, sharp cold that was nothing like the damp Hudson Valley chill I'd grown accustomed to. It was a Midwest winter, the kind that settles in your bones and whispers of childhood. I stood on the familiar porch, my duffel bag at my feet, the black fabric of the garment bag containing my dress blues slung over my shoulder. The house looked the same, perfectly manicured shrubs buried under a dusting of snow, wreath on the door, every light blazing as if to ward off the darkness. It was a stage set, and I was about to make my entrance. 3 years since I'd stood in this spot, a raw-boned 18-year-old with a secret acceptance letter and a deal with my father burning a hole in my conscience. The boy who'd left was all sharp edges and silent fury. The man who'd returned, and I did feel like a man now, in a way that had nothing to do with age, was built from those same materials, but tempered. Forged. Captain Rostova had once told me that discipline was the bridge between goals and accomplishment. I'd built that bridge, plank by painful plank, and now I was walking across it. I didn't ring the bell, I turned the knob and stepped inside. The heat hit me first, along with the scent of pine garland and roasting ham. The sound of a dozen conversations clattered against the foyer's marble floor. A Christmas party. Of course. Diane wouldn't let a minor inconvenience like my homecoming disrupt her annual showcase of domestic perfection. My father saw me first. He was emerging from the kitchen with a tray of canapés, his accountant's shoulders slightly stooped, his face etched with the familiar weariness of a man perpetually navigating a minefield. His eyes passed over me, then snapped back, widening. The tray wobbled in his hands. Liam. Hi, Dad. He set the tray down hastily on a console table, his movements clumsy. He came towards me, his gaze taking in the sharp creases in my trousers, the polished brass of my buttons, the distinct, squared-off silhouette of the uniform. He looked older. The lines around his eyes were deeper. But there was something else in his expression, beneath the shock, a flicker of something that might have been pride. My godson, you look different. It's been a while, I said, my voice calm. It was a tone I'd practiced until it became natural, the tone of a cadet who'd learned to sound confident even when he was. Then Diane was there, gliding into the foyer with a hostess's fixed smile. Robert, what's keeping the... She stopped. The smile didn't so much vanish as it calcified, becoming a brittle mask. Her eyes, the same cool, assessing shade as the marble floor, did a quick, inventorying sweep of me. I saw the calculations happening behind them. The cost of the uniform, the implication of its precision, the threat it posed to her narrative. Her gaze lingered for a half-second, on the USMA insignia on my lapels. Liam, she said, the name sounding like a foreign word in her mouth. We weren't sure you'd make it. The weather reports were so dire. She stepped forward and offered a cheek for me to air kiss, a performance for any guests who might be watching. I inclined my head slightly, a gesture of bare acknowledgement. The scent of her perfume, something expensive and floral, was overpowering. The flight was fine, I said. Traffic from O'Hare was the real beast. I used the academy slang without thinking, and I saw her flinch minutely at the word. Beast. She had no idea what it meant, but the connotation was clear enough, something harsh, something primal, something she couldn't control. Well, you're here now. She recovered quickly, smoothing the front of her designer dress. Let's not keep everyone waiting. I was just telling Uncle Charles and Aunt Carol how you're finally finding your way. She looped her arm through my father's, a possessive gesture, and led the way into the living room. The room was a sea of familiar faces made strange by time. Distant relatives, my father's colleagues from the accounting firm, Diane's circle of impeccably dressed friends. They all turned as we entered, and a hush fell, followed by a wave of murmured greetings. I felt their eyes on me, curious, appraising. I stood straighter, my shoulders squared, my spine ramrod straight from 2.5 years of being told to brace up, mister. Diane steered me toward a group near the fireplace. Charles, Carol, you remember Liam, my stepson? The emphasis on stepson was subtle, but it was there, a deliberate insertion of distance. He's home for the holidays. It's so good to have him back after his little break from academia. I felt a cold stillness settle over me. It was the same focus I found before an inspection or a land navigation test. The world narrowed to the moment. Uncle Charles, a portly man with a kind, slightly vacant face, smiled. A gap year, very fashionable these days. Get all that wanderlust out of your system before settling down, eh? Did you travel? Find yourself. This was the moment. The opening I hadn't known I was waiting for. I saw Diane's smile tighten, a silent warning. I saw my father shift his weight uncomfortably. For 3 years, I had carried the weight of her lie. I had endured the anonymous hardship of beast barracks, the relentless pressure of academics as an engineering major, the leadership challenges of being a squad leader, all while the story she told was one of a lost boy taking a lazy year off. The deal had been silence, but the deal had been made with a boy. I was no longer that boy. I looked Uncle Charles directly in the eye. "No, sir," I said, my voice level and clear, cutting through the party chatter. "I didn't travel. I've been at the United States Military Academy at West Point." The room didn't go silent, not entirely, but the bubble around our group did. Conversations stuttered. Heads turned. "West Point," Aunt Carol echoed, her eyebrows rising. "The Army School." "Yes, ma'am," I said. "I received my appointment 3 years ago, just after high school graduation. The past 2.5 years have been focused on military and academic training. I'm majoring in engineering management." Diane's laugh was a sharp, tinkling sound, like breaking glass. "Oh, Liam, don't be so dramatic. You make it sound so serious." She patted my arm condescendingly. "He's been at a military college, that's all. A very structured environment. It's been good for him." I turned my head slowly to look at her. The movement was deliberate, a studied calm that Captain Rostova had drilled into me. Never let them see you rattled. Composure is a weapon. "It's not a military college, Diane," I said, my tone leaving no room for her reinterpretation. "It is the United States Military Academy. Upon graduation, I will be commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army." I reached into my pocket. The heavy gold of my West Point class ring felt solid, real in my palm. It was a cow ring, earned after the grueling second-year year, a symbol of making it through the worst of it. I held it up, the black onyx and the class crest catching the firelight. "This isn't for show, it's earned." Uncle Charles whistled, low and impressed. "Well, I'll be damned. A West Point man, your father must be bursting." All eyes shifted to Robert. His face was pale, but his jaw was set. He was looking at Diane, not at me, and for the first time, I didn't see weariness in his eyes. I saw a dawning, cold anger. "He is," my father said, his voice quieter than mine but with a new, unshakable firmness. "We both are." The "we" was a lie, and everyone knew it. Diane's mask finally cracked. The polished composure shattered into something raw and furious. "This is what you do?" she hissed, her voice low enough that only our immediate group could hear, but the venom was unmistakable. "You come into my home during my party and show off, you try to embarrass me." "I'm stating facts," I said, meeting her glare. "The embarrassment is yours alone. You're the one who's been telling people I dropped out for 3 years." "Because it was a private matter." Her voice rose, drawing more attention. "A family matter, we agreed." "You agreed," my father interrupted. He stepped forward, putting himself slightly between Diane and me. His hands were clenched at his sides. "You agreed, Diane. I never agreed. I went along, to keep the peace, always to keep the peace." He shook his head, a gesture of profound exhaustion, but his gaze never left her. But this constant belittling of our son, telling everyone he was some kind of failure, for years, why? Our son hung in the air. He hadn't called me that in a long time. Diane recoiled as if he'd slapped her. Belittling him? I was protecting him, protecting us. Do you have any idea how it would have looked if the real story got out? That my stepson had to be shipped off to military school because he couldn't handle a simple misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I said, my voice dropping, becoming dead calm. The room was utterly silent now. The party had ceased to exist. You lied. You told everyone I was accepted to Stanford. I exposed that lie. And the deal wasn't about shipping me off. It was about me choosing to go to West Point and you choosing to hide the truth to save face. There's a difference. The truth, laid bare in the middle of her perfect Christmas party, was uglier than I'd even remembered. I saw the guests exchanging glances, the facade of the perfect Carter family crumbling before their eyes. You ungrateful little, Diane started, but Robert cut her off. That's enough, Diane. His voice wasn't loud, but it was final. It was the voice of a man who had reached his limit. It's enough. Look at him. He gestured toward me. Look at our son. He's not a boy anymore. He's a man. He's accomplished more in 3 years than most people do in a decade, and you're still trying to cut him down to a size that doesn't threaten you. Well, I'm done. I am done allowing it. The shock on Diane's face was absolute. She had built her life on his passivity, and the foundation had just crumbled. She stared at him, her mouth a thin, bloodless line. Then she turned and fled the room, the click of her heels on the marble a sharp, retreating tattoo. The guests stood in awkward silence. My father stood his ground, his chest rising and falling rapidly. He looked at me, and the anger in his eyes softened into something else, regret and a deep, weary shame. Liam, he began. I shook my head. Don't, Dad. I slipped my class ring back onto my finger. The weight of it was a comfort. It's done. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked through the silent, staring crowd, picked up my duffel bag and garment bag from the foyer, and walked out the front door. The cold air was a relief, a cleansing shock. I stood on the porch, breathing deeply, the vapor pluming in the dark. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang twice. Carter, that you? Please tell me you're not calling from some freezing guard post again. Maya's voice was a lifeline to a sane world. I'm home, I said. There was a pause. Oh, that sounds like the I'm home that comes right before, and I've already caused an international incident. What happened? The Christmas party. Diane told the dropout story again. Oh, she did not. I could hear the fury building in her tone. After all this time, what did you do? I corrected her, I said simply. In front of everyone, showed them the ring. Told them I was a West Point cadet, an engineering major, a future officer, the whole thing. A long whistle came through the phone. Damn, Liam, nuclear option, how'd she take it? About as well as you'd expect, but my dad finally said something. He stood up to her. No way, Robert, quiet, conflict-avoidant Robert. She sounded genuinely stunned. What did he say? He told her it was enough, that he was done allowing it. Holy shit, Maya breathed. The great passive awakening, how do you feel? I looked back at the house, the warm lights glowing against the cold night. For the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider looking in. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, outside of it, free of it. The need for their approval, for Diane's acknowledgement that had been a ghost haunting me for years. Tonight, I felt it finally dissipate. I feel light, I said, and it was the truth. The resilience I'd forged wasn't just about enduring hardship, it was about shedding the weight that wasn't mine to carry. I don't need anything from them anymore, Maya. Not from her, and not even from him, not like I used to. Good, she said, her voice firm with conviction. That's exactly how it should be. You're Liam Carter, United States Corps of Cadets. You don't need a damn thing from a woman who cares more about her place settings than her own family. I smiled, a real smile, for the first time since I'd arrived. Roger that. So what now? You need a rescue? I can be there in 20 minutes. We can go get disgustingly greasy food and mock your relatives. Not yet, I said, looking up at the clear, cold sky. The stars were sharp and bright, the same stars that shone over the plain at West Point. I think I'm just going to walk for a bit. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. I hoisted my bags and started down the familiar sidewalk, the snow crunching under my polished shoes. The uniform felt less like a costume now and more like a second skin. It was my identity, my proof. I had entered that house seeking something, vindication, maybe, or a final confrontation. I had found something better, my own independence, solid and unshakable. The confrontation was over. I had won by no longer needing to fight. The cold bit deeper than any winter I'd known at home, a clean, sharp cold that felt like it was scouring the air itself. I stood at rigid attention on the plain at West Point, the gray wool of my dress uniform a brittle shield against the Hudson Valley wind. 3 years. It felt like a lifetime and the blink of an eye. The cacophony of the ceremony was a distant hum, the brass band, the speeches, the rustle of thousands of spectators, all of it filtered through a strange, focused quiet that had settled inside me. This was the end point of a path I'd chosen in secret, a path that started with a lie and a handshake in a quiet study. My eyes scanned the sea of gray and white, the rows of new officers standing as still as the statues that dotted the academy grounds. Then I found them. Maya, a splash of vibrant color in a dark green coat, was beaming, her smile so wide it seemed to defy the gravity of the occasion. Next to her, my father stood, looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered. His shoulders were hunched against the cold, but his face was tilted up, his expression one of such profound, bewildered pride that it tightened something in my chest. The space beside him was conspicuously, predictably empty. Diane's absence was a final, silent verdict on my choices, and I found I felt nothing about it but a faint, distant relief. The name Second Lieutenant Liam Carter echoed across the plain. The word felt solid, real, a weight I was ready to carry. I stepped forward, accepted my diploma, and felt the handshake of the superintendent, a firm, brief pressure. But the moment that truly marked the transition wasn't the diploma or the applause. It came after. As the ceremony dissolved into a chaos of celebration and reunions, I found my father and Maya. Maya launched herself at me, her hug a fierce, familiar assault that threatened the perfect lines of my uniform. "You did it, you idiot," she whispered into my shoulder, her voice thick. "You actually did it." When she pulled back, my father was just standing there, his hands shoved deep into his coat pockets. He looked older. The weariness that had always clung to him seemed softer now, less like defeat and more like a quiet acceptance. "Liam," he said, and his voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. "Son, I don't have the words." "You don't need them, Dad," I said, and I meant it. His presence was the apology he'd never been able to voice. We ended up at a small diner off-post, a place with cracked red vinyl booths and the smell of strong coffee and frying bacon. It was a world away from the polished marble and tradition of West Point, a deliberate choice. Maya chattered, filling the space with stories from home, carefully edited, I knew, to avoid any mention of Diane. My father mostly listened, stirring his coffee long after the sugar had dissolved. After Maya excused herself to take a phone call, a silence settled over the booth. It wasn't the tense, heavy silence of 3 years ago, but something more contemplative. My father stared into his mug as if reading tea leaves. "She didn't want to come, you know," he said finally, not looking up. "Diane said it was inappropriate, that your unconventional path wasn't something to celebrate publicly." He gave a short, bitter laugh that was so unlike him it startled me. What she meant was, it wasn't the story she told at her charity luncheons. The son who ran away to become a soldier isn't as neat as the son who went to an Ivy League school. "I know," I said. "I didn't expect her to." He finally met my eyes. "I'm sorry, Liam, for all of it, for letting it get to that point, for making you feel like you had to leave in the middle of the night." The words came out in a rush as if he'd been practicing them. "That deal we made, me giving you that money to go, it was the coward's way out. I should have stood up for you. I should have been your father." The raw honesty in his voice was unfamiliar territory. This wasn't the conflict-avoidant man I'd left behind. This was someone who had been doing some hard thinking. "It was the only way, Dad," I said, my voice low. "If you defought her openly, it would have torn everything apart. This way, I got my shot. You kept the peace." I paused, choosing my words with the same care I'd use reading a map. It wasn't right, but it was what we had. "We're in counseling," he said, the words soft, almost confessional. "Marriage counseling, it was my condition. After you left, after that Christmas, I realized I couldn't just keep existing." He shook his head. "It's slow, but I'm learning to say what I think. It's harder than it looks." I felt a surge of something that wasn't quite forgiveness, but was closer to understanding. He was trying. That was more than I'd ever had from him. "I'm glad." "I am proud of you, Liam," he said, and this time the words were firm, unwavering. "Not just for this." He gestured vaguely, encompassing the uniform, the academy, all of it. "But for the man you became on your own. I see it in you. The calm. You're not the angry boy who left." "No," I agreed, "I'm not." The moment was broken by Maya sliding back into the booth. "Okay, crisis averted. My mom was just checking I hadn't been arrested for excessive celebrating." She looked between us, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "Everything okay?" "Everything's good," I said, and for the first time in a long time I believed it. The true full-circle moment came later that afternoon, back on post. The tradition of the first salute is a sacred one. A newly commissioned officer seeks out a non-commissioned officer, presents them with a silver dollar, and receives their first salute as an officer. It's a sign of respect for the experience that will guide the new lieutenant's raw authority. I knew exactly who I was looking for. I found her outside the engineering department, her uniform sharp, her posture as incisive as her mind. Captain Eva Rostova was talking with a group of cadets, her words crisp and clear. She dismissed them with a nod and turned to me, a faint, knowing smile touching her lips. "Lieutenant Carter," she said. The title sounded right coming from her. "Captain Rostova," I said, coming to attention and rendering a sharp salute. "Request permission to present my first salute, ma'am." She returned the salute with a precision that was pure Rostova. "Permission granted, Lieutenant." I handed her the silver dollar, the coin cool in my palm. "A token of appreciation for all you've taught me, ma'am." She took the coin, her fingers brushing mine. Her eyes, always so analytical, held a warmth I'd rarely seen. "The debt is paid, Lieutenant. Remember, the rank is an appointment. The respect," she tapped the coin against her palm, "is earned. You've already started. Your file crossed my desk. You're headed to the 19th Engineer Battalion. Good unit. They'll keep you busy." "That's the hope, ma'am." "Don't hope for busy. Hope for competent NCOs. They'll be the ones who teach you how to actually do the job. Listen to them." She gave me a final, appraising look. "You've got the foundation, Carter. Now go build something." 6 months later, the cold was different. This was a dry, dusty cold, the kind that settled on the high desert plains of Washington State at Fort Lewis, now Joint Base Lewis-McChord. The air smelled of pine, diesel fuel, and damp earth. My office was a glorified cubicle in a prefabricated building, the walls thin enough to hear the hum of the battalion headquarters night shift. On my desk, under the glow of a green-shaded lamp, were the blueprints for a bridge. It wasn't a grand, iconic structure. It was a Bailey Bridge, a temporary, modular design meant to span a washed-out creek along a crucial supply route during an upcoming training exercise. But to me, it was a cathedral. I traced the lines on the vellum with a finger, feeling the raised ink of the dimensions. The calculations for load-bearing capacity, the stress points, the placement of each panel, it was a puzzle, a physical problem that required a solution. This was the heart of it. Not the saluting, not the uniform, but this. The application of force and material to overcome an obstacle. My platoon sergeant, Sergeant First Class Miller, a man with a face like tanned leather and eyes that missed nothing, leaned in the doorway. "Still staring at that paper bridge, sir?" "It's the real one that matters, Sergeant," I said, not looking up. "Just making sure I see it before we build it." "Good," he grunted. "The site rex is at 600. Your driver will be here at 5:30. Don't be late." It was less a suggestion and more a statement of fact. This was the dynamic Captain Rostova had told me to expect. Sergeant Miller had been building things and leading soldiers since before I hit puberty. My authority was on paper. His was etched into the very set of his shoulders. "I'll be ready," I said. He nodded, a gesture of approval that felt more significant than any commendation. "Get some sleep, sir. Tomorrow's a long day." He disappeared back into the dimly lit hallway. I leaned back in my chair, the metal groaning under my weight. The 3-year timeline felt like a dream, a montage of frozen moments. the suffocating heat of beast barracks, the endless nights studying thermodynamics and ethics, the grueling ruck marches where every step was a battle against quitting. The lie Diane had told herself and everyone else, that I was a problem, unstable, a failure in the making, that lie had been the anvil. The discipline, the training, the relentless focus I'd cultivated. That had been the hammer. They hadn't broken me, they'd forged me. I thought of Maya, her texts full of encouragement and profanity. I thought of my father, our conversations now tentative but regular, a fragile bridge of our own under construction. I thought of the soldiers in my platoon, their names and faces already becoming more familiar, more real to me than the guests at any of Diane's parties ever were. This was the ground I stood on now. Not the polished floors of a house that was never a home, but the packed earth of a motor pool, the gravel of a training area, the blueprint of a bridge that needed building. The anger that had once been a sharp, jagged thing inside me was gone, tempered into a quiet, steady resolve. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The outsider had finally found his unit. I folded the blueprint, switched off the lamp, and walked out into the clear, cold night, the stars sharp and bright above the silhouettes of the equipment we would use to build tomorrow. There was work to be done.